Over the years, the media has seldom held back alleging health consequences of consuming the various products that our farmers produce. And today, we've reached an interesting time in our history where we must now consider the health consequences of consuming the product the media produces. Could news be to our mental health what junk food is to our waistline and our physical well-being? I had the pleasure of growing up and farming with my dad and my two older evil brothers. Evil because they made the youngest brother do all the nasty jobs like, spreading manure. So have a look at these headlines. Just one look at these important news headlines, and it just becomes completely understandable why we consume so much news. Because the quality of this must-have information is undeniable. You can see why people are addicted to this stuff. The news is simply loaded with need-to-know, life-changing information. All right, numerous studies show that everyone really has trouble identifying fake news. So the most important thing that you can do to avoid this disinformation is never trust a single source. If a news story is reported by multiple news sources, it's more likely to have credibility. So the way real news works is that one outlet will often break a story, but if it's real and it's important, others will be reporting it within hours or even minutes because the media has a pack mentality. So if no one else is addressing the topic within a reasonable amount of time, that is good reason to be suspicious. So where on this list are the risks that the media talks about the most? Let me zoom in again here. Terrorism, wars, murder, natural disasters, all of it at the bottom of the risk profile. All of these issues represent very tiny risks, and yet the media keeps our focus on them because they're sticky, they're highly visible, and highly sensational. The mental health impact we end up with as a result of this is a completely wrong risk map in our heads. The threat of terrorism is overrated. Mental health is underrated. Movie stars are overrated. Nurses, farmers, and firefighters are underrated. Of course, the risk of plane crashes overrated. Car crashes underrated. This messes with our mental health because, as security technologist Bruce Schneier says, that people overestimate risks that are being talked about and remain an object of public scrutiny. He says they are much more likely to fear personified dangers than a statistic like the number of people killed by cancer. It turns out, big surprise, that immersing ourselves in the suffering of 8 billion strangers by being glued to a highly biased 24/7 news cycle is a recipe for damage to our mental health. The Journal of Health Communication reveals that far from being the best informed, people who consume the most news have the most irrational and skewed perceptions of reality. What does this statement say about consuming the product that we call news? I mentioned earlier to try to not read too much news from sites run by algorithms. An astonishing amount of your life and mine is run by algorithms now, which take your existing bias and feed you more of that. And for leaders, this is a serious error in judgment because it creates blind spots in our decision making. This error is called confirmation bias. If you believe, for example, that your favorite team is terrible because the coach is inept, confirmation bias means that you will go looking for proof or news stories that your opinion about that coach is true, while ignoring facts that might suggest the contrary. These algorithms don't challenge confirmation bias. They're actually fueled by it and continually send you news stories that agree with your existing bias. And so the risk is this creates potentially deeper confirmation bias, even extremism. The ability to unlearn and relearn will be one of the most important in the post-COVID era. Confirmation bias and news algorithms allow for none of this. Here's why this matters to our mental health. A study published by the Columbia Journalism Review has found that once factually inaccurate ideas take hold in people's minds, there are no reliable strategies to dislodge them. A ship doesn't sink because of the water that surrounds it. It sinks because of the water that gets inside.